Hello, religious studies class. It is too cold in that room. Absolutely not. I'm not going in there when it's 50 degrees. We're not doing that. So I'm just going to make you a quick video. Should be 20 minutes. That's what I'm hoping for. But we are going to get through 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Nehemiah, and Esther, because it's all kind of the same story of prophets to kings, kings to terrible choices that gets everyone kicked out of Jerusalem and exiled into Babylon, and then a little fun snippet of Esther saving her people. So let's get into it. 1st and 2nd Samuel. This is the beginning of the people saying, we want a king. So the reason God is irritated by this is because the reason they want a king is they want like a physical person to meet with other nations and act as a king. Before this, they just had prophets. So what they're looking for here is it shows like a lack of trust in God and says, we want this physical king to go like meet with the king of Babylon to talk on our behalf instead of the judges and the prophets. We want one person who's the king. God says, that's a terrible idea. It's not really going to go well for you. But fine, I'll choose a king. So he chooses Saul, as you know. So again, a transition between judges and kings, a contrast between good and terrible kings. So most of this 1st and 2nd Samuel, Kings, Chronicles is all about, hey, here was a really good king, here was a really terrible king. And so, it just kind of goes back and forth. So it's really a contrast between good and terrible kings and also the introduction of a prophet. So because now you have a king, then you have these prophets who come along and sort of try and advise the worldly king, if you will. So that's the beginning of the themes of these 7 books that we have. Okay, Samuel begins with the elderly Eli. So Eli is the last of sort of the great prophets of God, if you will, and he is the last of the official judges, and he has these terribly ungodly sons, and they like ruin the temple, and it's all really distasteful. So Eli has sort of bad sons. But he does have Samuel, who is his apprentice, if you will, who keeps coming to him. And he's, again, it's this contrast. Like these super evil sons and this very obedient Samuel, who is coming and hearing God's voice and realizes, it's sort of the process also by which Samuel realizes that he's a prophet of God. And this also sets up that contrast that we'll see between Saul and David as the kings come on. So again, Samuel was an apprentice to Eli, and Eli was the last of the judges who had some really distasteful sons. Okay, 2nd Samuel then is mostly King David's reign. Some things that happened here, some good things that happened here. I think I have a matching, which is like good and bad, good and poor decisions. He relocates the Ark of the Covenant, so he sort of like rescues the Ark of the Covenant and makes sure that it's protected. That's really awesome. He ends up capturing Jerusalem, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing. He recaptures, he gets Jerusalem back. So those are the two like really good things about King David's reign. He relocates the Ark of the Covenant. He captures Jerusalem. He recaptures like lots. He wins lots of battles. Like he's this like a bloody king. In fact, the difference between David and Solomon is David says to God, hey, I want to build you a temple. And God says, how about not? Like you've shed a lot of blood. And so I would love for my temple to be built by somebody who hasn't like killed thousands of people. So let's have your son or one of your heirs. So you start collecting the money and then I will have one of your descendants build me a temple. Let's talk about the poor choices. Poor choices. He has an adulterous relationship with Bathsheba and ends up killing her husband. So no, we're not doing that. We're not like killing people and having affairs with their wives. And then his son Absalom is completely rebellious and tries to kill him several times. And also another poor choice is he takes a census, which in itself isn't terrible, except God specifically says, don't take a census. Like he asks him, he tells him not to take a census. And King David's like, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. So the poor choices are the census, the adultery, and the killing. The good choices are he wins a lot of wars, he recaptures Jerusalem, and he relocates the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, anointed here is the theme. It brings up a lot of theological themes of election. Predestination is the fancy theological word for today. Predestination. You may have heard this. It's a very Presbyterian thing. They feel like certain people are predestined to be Christians and certain people are not, which feels gross to me in terms, I mean, I was Presbyterian for a while, but like if you really think about it, it means like God chose you before you were born to like rot in hell. And that seems like not characteristic of the God of the Bible. And that's just people taking it like really, really far. But essentially, predestination is the divine foreordaining of all that will happen, especially concerning the salvation of some and not others. So this is God deciding or just knowing who's going to be a Christian and who's not. So it gets a little dicey. Most people say, oh, he doesn't like condemn you to hell. He just already knows the decisions you're going to make and just knows who's going to heaven. Yeah. So anyway, predestination is that, in case you hear that theological word. Predestination means divine foreknowing or divine foretelling of who is doing it. And then we have prophecy, or the one who sees or hears the mind of God and announces it to the people. Now, depending on what kind of church you go to, if you go to a Pentecostal church, if you go to a church in which they practice prophecy, like I have gone to these churches, I have heard really great prophetic words. And so this, I believe, is a quiz question where I'm saying, what do you think about this? There's no wrong answer. I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, like, do you have thoughts on prophetic words? Like somebody gets up in church, usually if you've not gone to one of these churches, or somebody comes to you and says, hey, I heard a word during the prayer time for you that, that God loves you, or that, you should sell your car. I mean, usually it's not super specific, but, so this is just a yes or no. Maybe if you have a reason, like, or you can even just say, no, I've never been part of a church that does this, so I don't really think about it. Or yes, I'm part of a church that does this, so I think, that it still happens. Also, Samuel means name of God. Let's see what we got. 1st and 2nd Kings. So this book was written by Jeremiah, probably, for the people of Judah right before and after the exile. So this is sort of like almost a retelling, like, hey, take this book with you because you're about to get exiled into Babylon. You're going to want to remember that you're Jewish and you're going to want to tell your kids the story. So I'm just going to write it all down and have it there. So it goes into a lot about prophets and sort of the whole story. Like if your kids ask, why were we exiled to Babylon? Like, here's the story. Like, we made some poor choices. We had some disobedience. We didn't listen to the prophets. And it really is a whole, like, retelling of, hey, there was a good king and all these blessings. And then, hey, there's a bad king. And then this happened. And then a good king and a bad king. And the theme is, essentially, when you listen to the prophets and do what they say, things go well. When you disobey the prophets, curses, wrath, probably why we're exiled in Babylon. So let's behave, right? That's the theme of 1st and 2nd Kings. It just chronicles the good and bad kings. Essentially, it just goes through the good ones, and it's really repetitive. It's like this person was a good king, and then they had like terrible descendants, and the next two are really, really bad, and then there's like the great grandkid comes along and he's not as terrible, and everybody starts obeying and he listens to the prophets, and then there's like blessing, and then that person has a kid and he ends up being terrible, and it gives you sort of reasons why. But that is mostly 1st and 2nd Kings. 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Okay, nearly the same story, almost the exact same story with a few different details. This would be from a priestly perspective. So the idea of Chronicles is that perhaps this was written by a priest to priests, because it's very, very specific on like the temple rules. This is like pages and pages, if you've ever flipped through the book of Chronicles, of like who can go in the temple, how big the ropes on their robes need to be. I mean, it's extremely specific, and you can see that it's probably written to temple rulers, worship leaders. It would be like the bylaws of the church are written down. So it's extremely detailed. It retells the same story, but with the added details of like, here's specifically what they did wrong, and here's the temple rules, and this is what you need to do. It gives like worship leaders rules. It gives different people who have different jobs, religious service within the temple, it gives them jobs specifically. Okay, next one.